So I'm going to get started by creating a new project. I'm just going to call this scene transitions test, and I'll save it in my computer, of course, save it at any location you want. And I'm going to put it at mobile landscape desktop, but I'm going to change this later. And optimize for pixel art since we're going to be using pixel art, and do not allow players to authenticate in game because we don't need that. Now we're going to create project. Now, before I start, for this tutorial, you can use any screen size you want, but just for the simplicity and for one of the scene transitions we're going to do later, I'm going to pick a smaller size. So I'm going to go to properties, and of course you don't have to do this unless you want to follow exactly along with me. I'm going to set the width to 800 and the height to 600. Put no changes in game size and just leave it at that. Now we're going to get to our first scene transition, and this is one of the most popular scene transitions in video games. This can be seen in professional video games, and this can be seen in more beginner type and indie video games. So this is the fade out scene transition. So the first thing we're going to do is like, how do we actually make a scene transition? Well, the first thing we want to do is add a new object, and we're going to put this object as sprite, and I'm gonna name this black. Not black. It could be a black. I could just name it black, but I'm gonna name it just for simplicity, cause it is a black square. I'm just gonna name it cover. So add animation, and my piscal isn't currently working, so I'm gonna add a sprite, but I'm gonna show you what I'm gonna do here. So I'm just gonna go to my documents, not documents, my pictures, go to my game sprites, and go to my test sprites. But all of this is a black cube. So all you have to do is open up Piscal like I'm about to do now. Open up Piscal and go to the bucket tool, go to black and paint the whole thing black. This is all you have to do in your Piscal. My Piscal is broken, so I can't show you here, but I have to use the external one. So I'm going to apply this. Now we have the cover, and we're going to place this in the scene. Now, what do we want to do here? I'm also going to place another object just for testing purposes, and this will be called just cube. It's gonna be a red cube. And I'm also gonna do what I did once again. All you have to do is go to Piscal and use a bucket tool and paint the whole screen red for the sprite. But I already have the sprite ready. And I'm going to hit apply. And I'm gonna put this cube on this layer. Now, let's just pretend that this cube is the player. We're not gonna actually program it because we're talking about scene transitions. And now we're gonna make this thing the same size, width and height as the screen. So our screen size is 800 by 600. Whoops, this is position. So custom size 800 by 600, and of course this could be the size of the screen that you have. And I'm going to center it at 0, 0, and now it covers the entire screen. But as you can see, our player is over the scene transition, and that's not supposed to happen. Now we could do two things. We could set the Z order as higher than the player Z order, but that's not very flexible. So what we're going to do is add a new layer down here. If you don't have this tab, you can click the Open Layers panel, and I'm going to name this layer the transition layer. And by us putting this transition layer over over the base layer, that means any object on this transition layer will automatically appear over it no matter what the Z order is. So I'm gonna click into my cover object and go into transition, and as you can see now it's behind it. Now if I preview right now, nothing will happen because it's just a black screen. It's just the black cover is covering the entire screen. So how do we actually make this fade in or fade out? Now what we're going to do is go into our events and add our first event. Now what we want to do is we want to put always. We don't actually have to put any condition here, but we're going to put add action, go to cover, and since we're trying to fade in and fade out, the thing that relates to fading in and fading out in Gdevelop is opacity. Opacity is basically just shows um it shows the thickness of the object, how see-through it is. The less opacity, the less see-through, and the more opacity, the more you can't see through it. So what we're going to do is put subtract. And I'm going to put a value here. I already set up this value, but this can be any value you want, and I encourage you to experiment with it. 1.5. So the opacity every single frame, since we have this set as always, every single frame, the game will subtract 1.5 opacity from the object, and eventually it'll reach 0, and it'll be completely see-through. So let's preview this in the game now. As you can see, it slowly fades out. It's a nice little fade effect. If you want to make this slower, you can make it subtract at a lower rate, like 1 instead of 1.5. If you want to make it faster, you can subtract at a higher rate. And see, it's a nice, clean fade out effect. Now, let's say you want it to, let's say you want to make a fade in effect. Let's say you want to fade the screen to black once the player completes a level. But that's also very easy to do. Now I'm going to add a few new events for this. And this is going to be at the beginning of the scene because I don't want to really change um my block right now. At the beginning of the scene, we're going to go into cover, go into opacity, type opacity, and make the opacity equal to 0. That means at the beginning of the scene, it will not be able to be seen. Now, if we want to fade to black once you complete a level or something, what do? All we have to do is make it instead of subtracting opacity, we add opacity. So I'm going to add opacity at the rate of 1.5, just like we subtracted at the rate of 1.5. Now, what it does, it fades to black. And of course, you can make it faster, but that is how you do a simple fade scene transition. That's how you do it right there. Now, the next scene transition we're going to do is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to show you how to do several of these scene transitions. So I'm going to go to my project manager, and this is an untitled scene. I'm going to duplicate this scene, and it's going to be called Untitled Scene 2. That's fine. And I'm going to click into that scene, and I can see it's exactly the same. Now, I want to show you what this scene transition is going to look like. Now, this scene transition right here, this is how it's basically going to look like. It's going to start off black, like you're opening the level, and then it slides over. It slides over slowly, and that's a different type of scene transition that you can put in your game. I'm going to recenter this. And this is a very easy scene transition right here. And I'm going to delete this at the beginning of scene. Well, actually, I'm going to disable it by pressing B, not B, D. So, how do we actually make it slide over like I just showed? So, what we want to do, instead of changing opacity, we actually want to change the width of the object. So, I'm going to type width, and I'm going to subtract by the value of 7. I feel like that might be a good value. And let's see how that looks. Now, as you can see, it slides back, and this is a nice, clean-looking transition right here. And it's just very simple. Now, what if you want to add a little bit more something to it? Here's something cool you can also add to it. You can change the height as well. So I can click into cover, and this is in actions, by the way. I'm gonna go into height, and now I'm going to subtract. I'm going to subtract maybe by 5. And if you combine the changing the width and changing the height, look what type of effect we get. We get a box that's closed again, and that can also be used as a very cool effect. Also, you can change it from different directions if you want to. But I'm going to get rid of this. Like, let's say I wanted it to slide open from the top. Now it does it. And another thing I could do is, let me go back a few lines of code. I'm gonna press Control Z to undo. If I wanted it to, if I want the black thing, like the black cover, to go over it, like to slide over from this side instead of the other side, here's what we can do. Instead of actually creating like a whole new object or creating some new code, all we have to do is actually just flip it horizontally. So at the beginning of the scene, I'm gonna undisable this code by pressing D. At the beginning of the scene, we're gonna flip this cover, flip horizontally, and activate flipping yes. And I'm going to put this as trigger once because we only want it to happen once. And now look what type of effect we get. Actually, it's the same thing. Never mind. I actually had never tested this. But that's cool to know. So that is one thing to know. Flipping horizontally will not actually change which side it goes away from. So that's actually good to know. But I'm sure you could probably rotate it and get rid of the width from the other side. But that's how you also do this second type of scene transition. Now let's get into our third type of scene transition. So we're going to once again duplicate this untitled scene, and it's untitled scene 3 now. We're going to click into that, and I'm going to actually I'm going to get rid of all this code except for like this one. And here's what we're going to do. We want to make like a cube. Like, it's going to be a little bit hard to visualize, but let's say you have this hole in the middle of the screen that starts off. It's this blackness, and then there's a hole inside that blackness. And then the hole gradually opens up until the whole screen can be seen. We're going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to actually open up Piskel, and you can use it actually without like the external version of Pixel because my Piskel is like broken right now. So I'm gonna put the cover as, let me see, gonna put the cover. Yeah, it's gonna still be named cover, but I'm gonna get rid of this animation right here. I'm just gonna completely delete it. But I'm gonna go to Piskel and let me delete that since it has no sprite. It doesn't know what to do. So I'm gonna go into Piskel, and of course this can be your internal Piskel. And we're gonna actually start off with this black cube that we have here. And what we want to do is draw a hole in it first because we're going to do this in an animation type way. We're going to draw a hole first. So if we want to get to the exact middle of the sprite, this is a 32 by 32 pixel sprite. So what we're going to do is just simply count it off a little bit. So I'm going to go start from the top. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. And then I'm just gonna go all the way. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So you don't have to be exact with it because more than likely this is probably not the exact middle. But as you see from the human eye, this basically looks like the middle. So the reason why I'm putting this as white, just so we can have a reference point. But the sprite is going to start off with a small hole in it. That's going to be the first sprite. And now you see we have this small hole now. And here's what we're going to do. I'm going to speed this part up, but I got to show you the idea of it first. We're going to duplicate this frame by going up here and then clicking duplicate. And what we're going to do is going to zoom up to it, and we're going to delete the corners. And now you can see this makes a bigger hole. I'm going to show you one more time just so you get the idea. Duplicate this again, and delete the corners once again. And as you can see, we're going to keep doing this until the whole sprite is gone because that makes the sprite the hole gradually gets bigger. Now keep in mind, there are other ways to do this without animation, but the reason why I'm showing you this because it's flexible for all types of shapes and sizes. This can be done for all shapes, not just cubes and rectangles. This can be done for circles, triangles, anything you want. You just have to gradually get rid of the insides of it. So I'm going to speed this part up, but all you have to do is keep deleting the edges of these sprites. So now we're done with this part. Now, if you're using the internal version of Piskel inside of Gdevelop, all you have to do is hit apply, and you'll have this animation automatically saved. But if you're for some reason using the external version of Gdevelop like me, all you have to do is export it, and instead of exporting it as a PNG, you export it as a zip, and you simply download the zip to a certain location, and you'll just be able to save it from there. Now I'm gonna just call this something random. I'm literally just gonna call it random. I won't be able to remember this later, but it doesn't matter too much. I'm just gonna spend a little bit of time importing it here because you don't really have to follow this part because you probably use the internal Piskel. And actually, since I already made this for a previous tutorial, just to spend less time, I'm just gonna go to open transition and put this whole thing in here. Now, I'm going to drag this onto the scene. And all what you want to do is, once again, like we did earlier, I'm going to make this 800 by 600, the same height and width as the screen size, and center it at 0, 0, so it can cover the whole screen exactly. Now, all we have to do for this, since we have the animation now, we want to set the um, speed of it. So I'm going to actually show you the speed of it, the default speed first, so you can see how it looks. And I see it kind of looks a little bit choppy, which is kind of a cool effect sometimes, but you may not want it to look like that all the time. So I'm going to simply go to the animation speed, and to make it look less choppy, all we have to do is, let me first of all go to the animation speed and the, my apologies, let me just show you how to use it. I think Gdevelop removed the feature where you can change the animation speed by frames, or I cannot just find it for some reason, but I can't find it at the moment. So I'm just going to delete this animation. And if you want the animation to move faster, you make it go down, because this is basically showing how many frames of the animation are going to pass per second. Well, not how many frames, but how fast do you want them to go. So as you see, that's much smoother when we make it faster, and the higher we go up, the slower it gets. And this is just simply showing you, like this, like I said, once again, how to do a simple type open up animation. It's really cool for your games. Once again, you can do this for any shape you want. Now for the next scene transition, this is going to be a little bit more fun and slightly more complicated to make, but not much more complicated. So I'm going to duplicate the first scene once again and go to Untitled Scene 4 and X out some of these other scenes just so we can see everything better. And now what we're going to do. Now what we're going to be trying to do in this scene transition is we're going to try to make a pixelate almost effect, like there's pixels on the screen and they're disappearing. But the cool part about this is they're going to be disappearing randomly. That's the cool part. So every time they'll disappear differently. So let's go how to do this. Now what we want to do is actually get rid of this cover. Well, actually, I'm not going to get rid of it. I'm going to just rename it something different. I'm going to name it Pixel, and I'm going to place it onto the screen. And I'm also going to go to Setup Grid. Setup Grid and put this as 128 by 128 of cell size. And I'm going to show the grid so we can see it. And they're pretty big like this. Now what I'm going to do is go to the custom size of the pixel and also set it to 128 by 128. Now what we're doing is we're putting instances of this pixel into the grid. Now, if this is not perfectly spaced out, this is just a rough estimate. You could do some calculation to perfectly space it out. But just for the sake of simplicity and time, I'm going to have it 128 by 128. Now, what we want to do here is duplicate these pixels until it covers the whole screen, like this. Duplicate it like this. I'm going to speed this part up. Okay, so now we're done making this grid. And one thing that's important to do is grab the player object. And we're going to select all of these by dragging it like this. And I'm going to put all of these part of the transition layer so that they appear over the player. Now, if you did this correctly, or if you're using the exact same settings as me, you should have 35 pixels on screen. And we can just use simple multiplication, 5 by this side and 7 by this side, and 35. So 35 pixels, but if you're using a different screen size, there will probably be more or less pixels. But that's not the part that matters. Now we want to make the code that deletes each pixel randomly until all of them are gone. Now we're going to actually need an extension for this. Now this extension, I'm going to go into our project manager, go into extensions, and I'm going to put repeat, and look what should pop up. Repeat every X seconds. And this is a very good extension that almost everyone should be having in their project because it's going to be useful at some point. Now, what do we want to do? Now, I'm going to add a condition by using this extension. Repeat every X seconds, and repeat every X seconds in X amount of numbers times. I'm going to name this just simply delete. And the time between each trigger, just as a test, I'm going to set this as maybe 0.05 because it's important that it's going quite fast because we don't want the scene transition to take forever. And now the limit of the loops. This is how many times we want the loop to happen. Now, since we have 35 blocks or pixels, we want to do the 35 times. But basically, all you have to do is count the number of pixels you have on your screen that we just placed, and that's the number of times you want to do this. And I'm gonna hit OK. Now, for the action, what we want to do is pick a random pixel. So I'm gonna just go down until where it says pick a random object. And there's a nice feature for Gdevelop. Pick a random object. And I'm going to read this description so we can understand it better. Pick one object from all of the specified objects. When an object is picked, the next conditions and actions of this event work only on that object. Now, what is it saying here? Basically, any action that we put after this is going to happen to the object that just got picked. It's not going to happen to all of them. It's just going to happen to the object that just got picked. So all we have to do now is put delete. We're going to click into our pixel and put delete. And now let's see this in action. And see, it randomly gets rid of all the pixels. And just to show you that it's random, I'm going to preview again. And it's not going to look exactly the same as it did last time. I'm going to do it one more time. Yep, it's always random every single time. And this is a nice, cool pixelate type effect. It's really great. And that's how you do a pixelate effect for the opening of a scene. Last but not least, I'm going to show one more scene transition to end off the video. So I'm going to duplicate this first scene one more time. And it's going to be called Untitled Scene 5. Whoops, I clicked into Untitled Scene 4. Untitled Scene 5. Now, what do I want to do here? Now, I'm going to create two objects. I'm going to rename this object just so I don't have to create another one. Block, just simply block. And then I'm going to duplicate this object. And it's already called block 2, which is perfectly fine. Now, what I want to do is, for a scene transition, I just want to give you an idea of how it's going to look. Basically, there's going to be 4 blocks that cover like the entire width of the screen, that evenly cover that. And 2 of them are going to be moving to the left, like this. And 2 of them are going to be moving outwards to the right. That's just kind of an idea of how it's supposed to look. Now, here's what we're going to do. This is why we have 2 separate objects. Now, you're going to have to use a little bit of math for this, but since my screen is 800 by 600 width coming first, if we want to evenly space it out in 4s, since the height is 600, 600 divided by 4 is 150. And of course, all you have to do for this is get your screen height and divide it by 4, and then you'll be able to evenly space out the height. And we can set the width as 800, since that'll cover the whole thing, and 150 as the height. And I'm going to center it at 0, 0. This is the first one. Now, what I'm going to do here is we're going to use block 2. And block 2 is also going to have a custom size of 800 width and 150 height. But here's the thing. The X position of this one, since we want to evenly space it out, is 0. And the Y position is just where the other one left at 150. Make sure this top one is block 1 and this second one is block 2. Now, since block 1 is supposed to be moving left and block 2 is going to be moving right, we don't have to create 4 blocks because all I have to do is just duplicate this block since they'll both be moving in the same direction anyway. And like I said, all we have to do is leave off where we left off. So since this is 100 by 50, well, 150, we set this X as 0 and we set the height as 300. And now we're going to duplicate block 2. Make sure you get this part right. And set the X as 0 and the Y as 450, since 300 plus 150 is 450. Now, of course, you can click into all of these, set them to the transition layer so that they always appear over the player or whatever objects you have in your scene. And now they cover the whole screen. Now, what do we want to do? This is going to be extremely, extremely simple. So, all we have to do is do this. We want to subtract the position of block 1. So at the beginning of the scene, since we want block 1 to move left, we're going to go into position, X position, and we're going to put minus because minus will make it go to the left. This is just simple math. And I'm going to make it move to the left by 10 pixels every frame. Let's see how this looks. I can see the blocks move over there, but I can see we still have these other block 2s. So we're going to change their X position as well. So I'm going to add an action, click into block 2, type in position, X position, and then add. Since we want to go to the right, now we want to add 10 pixels every frame. It's important that these both sync up so that they can both disappear at the same time. And now you see we have a cool little effect. You could also reverse the directions. I can set this to subtract. I can set this to, well, I'll put at -10. We'll add -10 just for this sake. And subtract -10. And this will reverse it. And I can see we get the reverse effect. And that is how you do scene transitions in Gdevelop. Now, it's important to be creative with your scene transitions because you can do so many. And really, the foundation of scene transitions is objects being deleted, or objects being moved, or objects being faded away. By using unique movement with many objects, you can create some amazing scene transitions. So it's important that please play around, make your own scene transitions, and just have fun with it. So I want to thank you all for watching this Gdevelop tutorial. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It would be greatly appreciated. And come back and be ready for the next video. Thanks for watching once again, and I'll see you later. Peace.